What's up, guys? Metal571 here today, and I'm going to talk about the Shure SRH440, also known as the headphone that you've seen on my head quite often, but I have never actually reviewed. So, first, what is this headphone for? This is a closed-back monitor. It is intended for tracking, as far as I can tell, in the studio. So it isolates quite well and is designed for listening to your music as you record it. Now, what is the hardware like? That's fairly simple. Actually, it's not as good as a lot of other headphones in this price range. This is about, I usually don't mention prices, but here I'll say that I had this. This is kind of old. I think I had this about a year or two ago. Finally got it back recently, and this is a $99 headphone. But the problem is that it doesn't feel like one. The plastic is kind of flimsy. It kind of sounds cheapy. There's no like nice clicks, you know, when you adjust the headband. This feels like it's gonna break because it's plastic here rather than like metal that's exposed that a lot of decent headphones use for their headbands. And I don't get an overall feeling of like this is gonna last a long time. And in fact, the demo unit in a Sam Ash where I originally demoed these before purchasing them was pretty beat up, but that's normal. But I still think that there are some other headphones in this price range that would fare better. As you can see, the KRK KNS8400 I'm wearing on my head as a monitor right now, it actually has a metal headband. The M40X has a metal headband. I don't have any other headphones on hand in that price range, but there are quite a few for $100 that have a better build quality. It's not bad, but it's a little bit subpar, so it's something to keep in mind. Also, the cable is removable. It's a twist lock type, probably proprietary because of the twisting, and goes in the hole there. It comes with one coiled cable. You don't really have the option for a straight cable in the box, at least, and it's terminated in a 3.5 millimeter, and you do get a screw-on 1/4-inch jack. So it's pretty standard fare. It's nice that it's removable. I believe there is a straight cable you can buy separately, but it doesn't come with it, so that's also worth noting. So out of the box, this is not a headphone you're going to wear out in public walking around. I mean, you could wear it while on the bus or something like that. It would work pretty well for that. So now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about the comfort. The comfort is a mixed bag, actually. The ear pads do kind of get sweaty and hot after a while. And the problem with that is actually in this price range, that's kind of acceptable, but again, they're still pleather pads we're talking about here. You're not getting velours. Velour pads tend to not isolate as well, which is one reason why a lot of headphones that are for tracking don't use them, for fairly obvious reasons. Isolation is very good as a result of these pads. Almost as good as the 280 Pro. Not quite as good, but almost as good. I had these side by side with them at one point. As one of my friends lent me a 280 for a little while. Maybe I'll do a review on those eventually. But all in all, the comfort on these is, again, a mixed bag. So the pleathers they're big enough. That's what they are. They're big enough to hold your whole ear in here, which is nice. But they're not deep enough. Which is why I say that they're kind of mixed. You've got a nice large opening here, and my ears are not ridiculously large. They're a little bit larger than average, I'd say. One is a little bit bigger than the other. The problem is I still touch the inside here with my earlobe on my left ear. but not my right ear. So you may want to try these over long periods. That can bother some people, so that's why I'm mentioning that. But I think for shorter trips, and if you commute on a bus for less than an hour, I think they're probably okay, as long as this doesn't bother you. There's almost no padding on the headband, so that might become an issue with people who have less hair than I do. Again, comfort is a mixed bag. It's really all there is to it. But isolation is excellent. Alright, now let's talk about the sound. As usual, the bass. What is the bass like? You know, actually, before I go into the specifics of the sound, really overall, it's not that far off from the sound signature of this guy, the HD600. Very common, not common, very popular open back reference headphone. It's very similar. It has a little bit more bass. It has a little bit more bass extension, and it has a little bit more treble at 10K and above, which I tend to like. However, I still think the mids are too forward. They may not be for many people. They're not quite as forward as an MDR V6, but overall, it bears a little bit more than a passing resemblance to the frequency response of the HD600. So the bass, as I said, is a little bit more than the 600, a little bit more extended, but it's not as clean. However, it really does dig lower than the 600. Most people will find these bass light. I would happen to agree. I had to add quite a bit of bass on my EQ to make them satisfying, but that's just my preference. We're talking like 10 decibels at 30 dB. And then Q of maybe like 0.9. That's what I used to make them more of, to cater more to my taste. The mids are very neutral in their timbre. However, they're still too forward for me personally. A lot of people may find them just fine. They match up more with like the 598, 600, HD 598, HD 600 kind of mid-range voicing. It's very neutral, but it's a little bit too harsh for crappier recordings, like listening to metal, and some rock guitars may stick out a little bit too much on some recordings, but you may be fine with them. Most good recordings, it'll sound okay. The treble is, like I said, a little bit more than the 600. So actually the null at around 6K on these is a little bit more pronounced as a result of the treble being a little bit hotter at 10K and above. I like the treble on this headphone. I think it's really well extended for the price, and it was very impressive when I first got it, as it is right now. I don't really touch it. I don't feel the need to touch it with EQ, which is a good thing. It's not piercing. It's not dark. It's very, very well... It's pretty well textured for a headphone that costs this much. I'd say the treble is probably the best part of this headphone. Now, comparing it to the 600 again, this is all without EQ. It's definitely not as clear and clean as a response. There's more harmonic distortion. There's a little bit more ringing. It's more indistinct. You're not going to get the clarity of the 600 in this guy. That's just the way it is. But I'd say the sound signature they nailed from a monitoring standpoint. They're ever so slightly bright to flat treble. The usual 15 dB, 12 to 15 dB bump at 3.5K and an uncompensated frequency response. And the bass is not bad for $99. It doesn't dig really, really, really deep, but it can hit some of the lower notes. There just does roll off like most dynamics. But there's a little bit more of it here than there is in some open backs like the 600, which is nice. But I still think it sounds bass light, and most people, I think, would agree with that. Soundstage-wise, don't expect much. It's a lot more narrow. Perhaps not an M50, but a little bit, maybe a little bit wider than that. But things don't really sound fantastic in terms of imaging or soundstage width here. Again, not that unusual for the price range. Not going to knock it too much because of that. It's not as narrow as an M40X, but it's nothing like a DT770, for example. Alright, so that gives you a good idea of what these sound like, what the comfort's like, the hardware, the price. Overall, this is one of my preferred headphones for this. There's a lot of tracking headphones that float around this price. Just to name a couple: MDR V6, MDR 7506, very similar by the way, M40X, SRH440. Model up from this is the SRH840, which is fairly popular, or at least it used to be. I don't see these mentioned that often, which is why I feel the need to review them, at least now. You've got the HM5 Brainwave, slightly more expensive. M50X, slightly more expensive. Tagstar Pro 80, a little bit cheaper. I mean, there's quite a few. The K271, slightly more expensive, which I've reviewed those in the past. Sold them, rebought them, probably about to sell them again. And yeah, so there's quite a few tracking headphones out there, and I think they hit a lot of marks that they need to, but they certainly are not perfect. However, the evenness of the response is a little bit uncanny and impressive. The lack of coloration in general, off of what a lot of people are used to hearing, is quite good. I feel like this is a direct upgrade from an MDR V6. It's got more clarity, more bass extension, and slightly less upper mid-range, but and better comfort. Man, I did not like the V6 7506 pads, at least the stock ones. So it does a lot of good things, and for the price, not bad at all. That's why I use it as a monitor. It's pretty accurate without really needing any kind of severe EQ changes. So that makes it quite good on its own. It's hard to say about a lot of other monitors. They tend to vary in sound signature. This one is a little bit more toward the bright side, a little bit more towards the slightly forward mid side of things, and somewhat lean bass, but not too lean. Lean bass with a little bit of more extension. So there you have it. I guess the last thing I could show you is these do fold. The ear pads do not, the ear cups do not swivel very much, but just enough to fit properly. But you can fold these up, so you can fit them in your bag or whatever, and for storage easily. M50X does this, M40X does this, MDR V6 does this. A lot of studio headphones do that. 280 Pro. So there you have it. And I hope that helps. The SRH440 still is, I think, one of the better values in the price range. I don't hear it mentioned as much. I feel like it used to be a little bit more popular, and I don't see a lot of people on the Reddit and the subreddit, the headphones subreddit, owning them, but they're worth a look. So give them a listen. These are actually not too hard to find at your local Sam Asher Guitar Center, so I hope you get to demo these, and hope I helped you out. So I'll see you guys next week. As usual, any questions I will try to answer as soon as I can in the comments, and take care, guys.